So my partner and I lately have been talking about what you would consider to be the most egregious pizza topping. I mean, because, okay, there's lots of different toppings we could put on pizza, and I know people have the pineapple debate.
I know. Yes. Everybody's
like pineapple
so
on
down
pizza.
on pineapple. That's my favorite pizza topping. I'm just
Pineapple
going to
too. Yeah,
that
but
is
I'm
my
going to
favorite.
say, I think a lot of toppings just come to personal preference, and they're not egregious.
Right, terrible.
It's not like out of this world to put pineapple on a pizza. I also like broccoli on pizza a lot.
Well, I love broccoli on pizza too.
Broccoli on pizza.
Some
is
people
an
give me weird
choice.
looks on that one, but
yeah, but I think that's a good pizza topping. And I mean, I'm down for mushrooms. Mushrooms are probably my favorite pizza.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, I know people don't like mushrooms though, but I feel like again, it all just comes back to I'm not going to put meat on my pizza. But I understand that people put meat on their pizza.
Anchovies, that one's kind of divisive. A lot of people find anchovies not
It probably comes down again, though, to whether or not you like an anchovy.
Right.
Seafood pizza is a thing. And, you know, if you like seafood, then
clam
on pizza. Yeah. Or like in Maryland, obviously, we have crab pizza.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yes, all those things taste delightful with cheese and bread and sauce.
So the question becomes, what topping is actually egregious?
Yeah, that's a good question. Me personally, though, this is just a personal preference, is green peppers. Because it makes
you don't like
the whole pizza taste like green peppers, and I hate green peppers. And when you told me about the Altoona pizza with American cheese on top of the green peppers, that was my worst nightmare. But that's like, it's still a good pizza topping, though, right? It's a veggie that's common. So
I'm picturing this scenario. You go over to a friend's house, and they're like, hey, I'm going to order a pizza, but I usually just get a plain cheese pizza because I put my own toppings on it because the store doesn't have the toppings I want. And so then they get the pizza delivered to their house.
Okay.
And then they put this topping on it, and you're just like, no. that's unhinged.
Ooh. I mean,
I have a good answer.
Yeah, you start. Let me think about that.
Raisins.
Yeah, that's pretty gross.
Someone sprinkled raisins on top of their pizza. That is unhinged.
Yeah. Though, I mean, how far away is that really from pineapple? It's a fruit.
Oof. But like kiwi?
Okay, no, that's weird. That would be weird. Or any kind of probably citrus, right? Lemon or lime or like,
that'd be,
I don't know, some grapefruit. That would be terrible.
Some grapefruit wedges on it. If someone did that, though, you're like at their house.
I'd be like, you're disgusting. You're disgusting.
What are you doing?
I will make a case for raisins, though. I could picture those like with a goat cheese and like some other savory toppings, kind of like figs. I think figs are delightful on pizza.
Figs are good. Blueberries. I've also had like a blueberry brie, right?
Ugh.
Pizza.
Oh no, that one.
Okay.
That one.
Blueberries. You think it's raisins? It was like in Maine though.
Yeah.
Because like Maine's got the blueberry. Yeah.
I guess I could see the savory, like, okay, with brie. That makes sense.
I could see like mango, right? That's like tropical, like a pineapple.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to go back to grapefruit. I think that would be the worst. Banana, though, like a roasted banana or like a plantain, I could see that being okay.
It feels like what this conversation comes down to, though, is that pretty much anything could go on a pizza.
Yeah.
Except maybe grapefruit.
Those flavors would really clash. Really clash.
I also feel it would be unhinged if someone got a pizza delivered and then poured a bag of Butterfinger BBs on top of it.
I was just going to say chocolate. Like, some kind of chocolate topping would be no. Like, that's for a dessert pizza.
Not with, like, tomato sauce.
No.
Also, gross. I don't even think they make Butterfinger BBs. So if someone pulled out a bag and put them on it, I would be like, what is actually wrong with you? Maybe. I feel like they
got
did.
Rid of the BBs. Those were great, though. I love those.
They were a solid candy choice.
You know what I had trouble finding last year was my Butterfinger bells. Those were hard to find.
Oh,
I know.
The Butterfinger bells. Katie always had a drawer with a secret stash of Butterfinger bells in college.
Yeah, during the holidays. They only come out during the holidays, and they're the best.
Butterfinger bells.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
With my PhD in geography
and my master's in library science,
doing deep dives on topics is our idea of a fun time together. We'll share our findings with you on
Researching the Obvious.
Products, though. Products is kind of going to be a discussion today. Because we're going to talk about grocery stores.
Yes. And you know what else I was thinking about is grocery shopping with you. Because one of my favorite parts about grocery shopping with you in college was like going to the little Durham marketplace and we would go through and right? Yeah, we're in college, so we're not spending a ton of money and we're getting just the basics. I need some Cheetos and chips and pop and snacky type stuff. Yes. And then we would plan some meals like senior year when we had a kitchen. We would definitely plan some meals together that we were going to do throughout the week. A couple, because we're still going to the dining hall too. But every time we'd like walk through the store, we'd shop together, we'd each put things in the cart, and we would get to the checkout and we're like, okay, how are we splitting this up? And just like right before the checkout, I'd be like, well, I'll get this. And you'd be like, okay, well, I'll get this then. And we would kind of just like grab things and try to split it up as evenly as we could. And literally every time we were like within pennies. I mean, sometimes pennies.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes pennies.
Yeah, pennies.
And I'd be watching them ring it up. And like, how close are we going to be? Like, the most we were ever apart is maybe a couple dollars. There were definitely times when it was pennies apart.
Well, it definitely became a joke because it was like, we're so good at dividing up groceries that we are within cents of each other just randomly.
Right.
In the checkout line. It's not like we're like doing math.
We didn't plan ahead.
While we're
shopping. No, it's just like we got to the checkout. We're like, what makes sense for you to buy and me to buy? Because we're just trying to make it kind of even. Because it's for like stuff that we were making together. So
and usually we'd be within $1 typically. Yeah. But sometimes within 10 cents.
Yes. Yeah. It was crazy. I still don't even know how we did that.
Yeah. I will also say that going grocery shopping with you in college made me realize that I am bougie.
Yeah.
The Capricorn side came out and I became a food snob and was very particular about my foods.
Well, I definitely realized maybe not quite to the same level, but I think we both had a lot of complaints about things that we could or could not get in the grocery and variety of choices and brand quality and things like that. Where I also realized, I feel like we spent a lot of time complaining about the little local grocery store because it was just not up to our standards for shopping needs.
It's true. We wanted specific brands. We wanted specific options. We wanted specific produce items.
Also, I'll just say like the whole grocery experience, right? Felt like the buildings seemed older. Things weren't kept up as nice. There are definitely like some groceries out there where you walk in and it's a soothing experience to do your grocery shopping. And the feel of the store, the way it's laid out, the lighting, all of that stuff, the way the produce is organized, all of that contributes to your shopping experience. And we did not have great shopping experiences in college.
The smell.
For whatever reason. Yeah, right. You can tell if that fish counter is like stinky. You don't want to be buying anything from there.
Depending on where you live in the United States, you have vastly different grocery shopping experiences. And obviously depending on your socioeconomic status too, where you're shopping is gonna have a huge difference.
Yeah, or if you're in a more urban environment or a suburban environment or a rural environment also affects how many places you can get to within a certain amount of time or effort.
Yeah, there wasn't really a full service, what I would consider to be a full service grocery store in the town where the university was.
So it was a little bit more of a, I mean, it wasn't like it was terribly far away, but I guess I'm used to at least living in the Midwest and living fairly close to the city. I have like 6 grocery options within 10 minutes. I was very spoiled in that I could be like, oh, if this grocery doesn't have what I want, then I'll go over here, or I'll buy my meat from this grocery, but I'll go get my pantry goods from this grocery because I know they're less expensive. And I didn't realize that it wasn't like that everywhere.
That's true. Yeah.
So many options.
What kind of grocery stores do you typically shop at?
Yeah, so to that point, I have about 4 that I frequent, 4 different stores. Typically, if I'm doing a big grocery run, it will be to our local Meijer. Then other than Meijer, sometimes I don't feel like going to Meijer because it is so big. Go in there, you walk a quarter mile to the back of the store to get your dairy, and then you have to walk a quarter mile to the other side of the store. We also have Kroger, and then I also do Trader Joe's for specialty items. And then also we have a market district not too far away from us. And then we do go for Costco for a few things that were like freezer items. I know your list is much shorter because it's probably just Wegmans, right?
Well, I don't do all my shopping at Wegmans all the time because I have to go out of Baltimore to get to the Wegmans. There's several Wegmans around Baltimore, but they're in a suburb. So it'll take me 15, 20 minutes to get to Wegmans. So I don't always go to Wegmans. It's also amazing, the end. I would say, though, the other stores that I shop at, the closest one to our house is Giant. Okay. So if I not wanting to drive all the way to the suburbs, then I go to Giant. But we also have a Mom's. It's a organic grocery chain from Maryland, and that's within walking distance of my house. So I'll pick up stuff there. Yeah. And the good thing about Mom's is because it's an organic store, they have all sorts of stuff in bulk, like spices and grains and things like that. So, and you can bring your own container to get that stuff.
That's why I've started often shopping at Market District more, is they have the bulk spices and a really nice bulk food aisle, and they have a really nice international foods aisle.
Yeah. Wegmans has extensive international foods.
I'm jealous of your Wegmans. I want Wegmans. I am jealous of your Wegmans.
Since we're talking about Wegmans, I'll do a little fast facts.
Please do.
For people unfamiliar with the greatest grocery store on the planet. I'm not biased. So Wegmans was founded in Rochester, New York in 1916 by the Wegman brothers, John and Walter, and it was founded as the Rochester Fruit and Vegetable Company. So it was originally a produce store, but basically it's been in the Wegman family ever since then. So currently Danny Wegman is the chairman. Everyone knows Danny. All the Wegman stores have a picture of Danny. I don't know. Is Danny a cult leader? Maybe.
I was just gonna say, it kind of reminds me of like how they'll have pictures of the Queen everywhere, and like
and
like England.
Wegman.
Danny Wegman.
The Wegman family. But so they have 111 stores. So they're actually not that big. I didn't realize that they only had just over 100 stores. They have a model of expansion that's been very slow. So for a long time, they pretty much only existed in Rochester and Syracuse, Buffalo, that kind of thing. But they've slowly started to expand outside of New York. And one of the reasons why their expansion has been slow is because of their grocery model, which is different than some other grocery stores models that we'll talk to today, because they try to partner with local farms. So a lot of their produce is featuring local farms, and you'll notice that when you go into the store, they'll have the produce up, and then they'll have like informational signs about what farm the produce came from. And then they also have a lot of their own facilities. So, for example, they do some partnerships with some universities in New York. So, like this morning, I bought some apples that were developed by Cornell University, and they have this big thing on the label that's like Cornell University developed apples. They're Snapdragon apples, in case anyone's interested. That's the type of apple.
Interesting.
So they have some partnerships to develop different foods. Also, all of their cheese is a big deal because they have their own cheese caves. And so they age all their cheese in their own cheese caves. And so it's
That's a
like
commitment
Wegmans
to
cheese.
cheese.
Yeah. Yeah, and their cheese is amazing.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Cave-aged Wegman cheese.
Their cheese is going to be their own brand of cheese because they're
Right.
making it in their own caves and aging it and things like that. And so they have a lot of their own branded products. So their store brand is the Wegmans brand, is the generic brand that they have. Anyway, that's why their expansion has been slow, because they want to be conscious of being able to provide the stuff that they provide to all of their stores with their own brand and their own specialty products and things like that. They have been recognized with a lot of awards, accolades. They have been on the US top place to work for list. They've been in the top 6 of companies to work for in the United States since 2016. And they've been on the list since the list started in 1998, but they've been in the top 6 since 2016. And it's because they have a lot of employee benefits, tuition waivers, and a lot of they pay really well and things like that. Consumer Reports has listed it as the number 1 grocery store in the United States from 2006 to 2017. They were listed as the number 1 grocery store every year. And Food Network even recognized it with its Best Grocery Store award.
Well, okay. Now you're just bragging.
Now Wegmans is just, yeah. But they're also definitely like a cult, I will say, because there's a group of people that refer to themselves as Wegmaniacs. And you can follow the hashtag Wegmaniac and see some of their adventures. There was one woman who did a trip over the summer to visit every single Wegmans that existed. So she did a giant road trip to go to every Wegmans. Some of these Wegmaniacs make it an effort to go to a new Wegmans when it opens, because they have a big opening party. And so they'll go. When Wegmans opened some of their first stores in Massachusetts, so I should say that right now, the 111 stores can be found in New York, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina and Washington, D.C. There's going to be one coming to Delaware. There's one in Brooklyn, which was a big deal because they put one in New York City, and they're going to be putting one in Long Island soon. In Connecticut, they're going to start expanding too. But when the ones opened in Massachusetts, there was a group of high schoolers who wrote an entire musical about Wegmans and performed it.
Oh my God. Okay.
Their school.
That's
so it's a cult. It's level. Fine. But it is an experience to shop at a Wegmans. Highly recommend visiting one if you never have.
Yes, I did enjoy shopping there with you. It was definitely one of the things when I came to visit you, where I was like, you must take me to Wegmans, because I've heard so much about it. And you would come back from vacation, summer or breaks or stuff with your Wegmans peanut butter and your Wegmans brand stuff.
Because I would argue that some of the Wegmans brand items are better than name brand items.
And I would agree with you. The most recent example that I came across was when we went on our little Airbnb summer trip, our little couples trip, and you brought
it's like a baked
the Wegmans
lay.
Version of a baked lays, and they were better than the baked lays. I mean, they were so delicious.
They're really good.
Yeah.
The other thing that's kind of cool about Wegmans is they are also conscious of local trends where they put their stores. So for example, some of the stores near me have a larger selection of Asian and specifically Korean foods, just because there's a larger Korean population.
So they do their demographic research when they open a new store.
So that's why you can get a pretty good selection of specialty products, because they'll look at what is needed in the area, even to the point where if I go to a Wegmans that's a little further west than my normal Wegmans, the produce section will be a little bit different, and they'll have a lot more Asian vegetables in the produce section at the one that's further west, closer to Korean population. Huge amounts of Asian vegetables.
Wegmans is a cool place. It's true.
I know. It's pretty good. But what's funny is, so Wegmans has been ranked number 1 in the Consumer Reports list, but ranked number 2 in the Consumer Reports list was one of the grocery stores we had in college, which I didn't even realize. And that was
Yeah.
Market Basket.
Yeah, but the one that we had wasn't that great. Also, this was in like circa 2004,
it was a while ago. Yeah.
2005. So things could have changed since then.
The most recent data I could find was that Market Basket was ranked number 2 in 2017. What I thought was interesting about Market Basket is it's also a pretty small chain of grocery stores. It's just in New England, so Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and they only have 90 stores.
Oh, that is small.
And Market Basket, it started in 1917, and it was actually from Greek immigrants in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And so that started, again, early 1900s. But what I thought was the most interesting thing about Market Basket is a couple things. One, they don't have loyalty cards. So I feel like that's pretty rare for a grocery store to not have a card. They don't have loyalty cards.
Pretty much everywhere you have to get a card.
Yes. Their other big things are they did not have a website or social media until 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. So they didn't even have a store website at all.
Wow. Yeah.
Until 2017. And the only reason why they started a website is because there was a customer who was just a local fan, and he created a website to post about weekly deals and stuff. And so other people who were customers were making websites. And so the company was like, I guess we should have So they might be on par with Wegmans fans. I don't know. They're making their own websites about it.
Yeah. I'm just impressed that it makes me
lasted
wonder
until 2017 without a website.
Yeah. With I guess just flyers, like newspaper ads.
I don't know.
Single-handedly supporting newspaper ads.
Yeah. And then the last big thing about them is that they don't have any self-checkouts. And the owner made a big deal about that because he strongly believes that you should have personal interaction at the store. And so he didn't want self-checkouts.
So they still don't have self-checkouts?
No.
That's a big red flag for me. I don't need to talk to anyone. I'm going to and you know what else? I want to bag my own groceries because you know how many times they freaking smashed my eggs or my bread or put like cold things with non-cold things and
bad baggers.
Organized my.
I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like it. Like I like to have full control over my grocery checkout experience.
So I thought that was interesting about Market Basket, though.
That is very interesting.
But they're both pretty small. They don't have that many stores. They're just very regional, both those.
Yep. I looked into some regional groceries as well that I was familiar with. So obviously one of them was Meijer, which I already talked about. I do a lot of my shopping there. And Meijer, size-wise, they're very Midwestern. They have 500 plus stores and express locations. So express locations are like Meijer convenience stores because typically the Meijer stores, they're really big super center type stores. They have home goods and then they have the grocery side. And then they almost always have a gas station that's like a Meijer brand gas station and a convenience store as well. So if you count the gas stations, they've got 500 plus stores, which is pretty sizable
500
for the area.
Definitely bigger than
for the area that they're in. Meijer was founded in 1934 by Hendrik Meijer, who's a Dutch immigrant, and he started it in Greenville, Michigan. They didn't open up their superstore, the concept that I was talking about, until 1962, and that was relatively novel at the time, offering the groceries as well as a department store type shopping experience. Actually, it wasn't just relatively novel. They were the first retailer in the U.S. to launch a super center concept where they combined the department store shopping along with grocery store shopping.
Yeah, that is pretty early, 1962, because I don't remember seeing that, I don't know, I guess until Walmart came to New York.
So they've been doing that since 1962. They're mostly in Michigan, but in the 1990s, they did expand into Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and Ohio, which also kind of surprised me because I didn't realize it took them until the 90s to get to Indiana, where I live, because we've always kind of had a Meijer for as long as I can remember, but that would make sense because I wasn't doing that much grocery shopping in the 90s. So anyway, also interestingly about Meijer, they have 14 different private label brands, which I was kind of shocked to find out.
Yeah.
Because
it's like Wegmans just has Wegmans.
Right? So
yeah,
Meijer, they have Meijer brand stuff like groceries, things like that. But then they also have, on the food side, they have Frederick's, which is named after their owner. It's supposed to be kind of the higher scale food products. Okay. So all the packaging is black and sleek and looks like it's supposed to be expensive, but it's not. Right.
Fancy.
And it's like kind of more unique food items sometimes, stuff like that.
Select.
Fresh by Meijer is their bakery and deli items. So they have a full bakery and a full delicatessen that have their own brand of items. True Goodness is their like organic type brand. And then they have their own ice cream brand. Purple Cow ice cream is apparently just Meijer ice cream. They have a clothing line called Falls Creek. They have a sporting goods line called Lake and Trail. They have home goods brand called Room and Retreat. They have Studio M Pro, which is like makeup tools and makeup items.
Okay.
They have Polar Wind, specifically fans. They have their own brand of fans.
So my question is with all of these like clothes and home goods and makeup, you can still only get them at Meijer?
Yeah. Yeah, they're only
just makes me wonder why they branded them as separate things.
I don't know.
Interesting.
They have their own lawnscape, outdoor supplies, grass seed, landscaping items, Texcellent, chargers and electronics. They have a baby toy brand.
They've really been
called
reaching their fingers into branding items. Yeah, making their own stuff. Interesting.
Yeah. And then recently they've also been introducing some different formats of stores. So they've opened up some stores that are groceries only. So not the home goods and department store type stuff, which I think is actually a really good idea because, like I said, my biggest gripe about going to Meijer is that the store is so big. It takes quite a while to do your shopping. Opening just the grocery specific stores. They piloted that in Chicago, and then they've opened some in other areas as well.
Like more of like a urban style grocery store.
But then they opened one here in the suburbs near where I live. So I think they tested it out in an area of Chicago, and then they've selected some other locations to try them out too. Meijer, the king of all the private brands, I guess.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So the other Midwestern chain that I actually discovered is coming to Indiana soon, which I was really excited about because we need another grocery chain, clearly, is Hy-Vee. And my parents
we had that when I lived in Kansas. We had that one.
And my parents, when they lived in Illinois, Hy-Vee was their main grocery store. It was my dad's preferred grocery store. So Hy-Vee was started in 1930 by Charles Hyde and David Vredenberg. That's where you get a combination of their two names for the name Hy-Vee. It started in Beaconsfield, Iowa, and they actually had leased their first store only weeks before the stock market crash of 1929.
Wow.
So they actually opened up the store in the midst of the onset of the Great Depression, and were still successful. They're actually employee owned, and you can find locations in Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And their largest stores have full service bakery, deli, pharmacies, like they have the salad bars, they have a health clinic, they have the fuel stations, like gas stations, and convenience stores. And there are a few that even have full service restaurants as well. Fun fact, the name Hy-Vee was actually selected in 1952. They held a contest amongst the employees to rename the store.
Oh, that's funny.
Prior to that, they were calling it supply store or service store with the name of the town that it was in at the beginning. So if you
I guess Hy-Vee is better than just service store.
Plus the name of the town. Right? So if you lived in like Springfield, Illinois, it would be the Springfield Supply Store, the Springfield Service Store. So they would tailor it to whatever town it was in. They decided to
yeah.
rename, and they held a contest, and Hy-Vee, a combination of the two owners' names, was shortened version of the two owners' names was the winner. So they've expanded really throughout the Midwest, but they've stayed in the Midwest. And like I said, they have plans to open stores in Indiana. The one that they're opening here is going to be in Zionsville. They also have quite a few of their own private label brands, including Baking Stone bread. They make their own bread. Char King. They make charcoal.
Oh.
Culinary Tours is their ethnic food brand. They have a seafood brand. Their organic or more nutritional, whatever marketed brand is called Full Circle. One of their brands is Hai Chi, which is frozen Chinese food entrees.
No, maybe rethink that one. Do another employee survey and change that name.
Hai Chai.
Okay.
Hai Chi? Hai Chai.
Questionable at best.
It's your churn ice cream.
I mean, that's
enjoy
just funny.
the puns.
Yeah,
yes,
so
I
that
know.
one's funny.
Pet food, Belgian chocolate bars that are like their brand. So I don't know. They also have their own cheese brand, like Wegmans, called Soiree Artisan Cheeses.
Wegmans makes most of those things. They just refer to it as Wegmans.
Yeah,
like they just don't have different names for all of it.
No,
which
I
is
know that's
interesting.
I thought so
branding.
too. They try to brand it so many
different
ways instead of just using the store name. And then the other store that I looked into, which I've never been to one of these, it's a more southern, Texas and actually Mexico store, but it's a big one, HEB.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been around since 1905, which is...
Ooh, they're older.
Much older, yes. And they were founded by Florence Butt. Sorry, I'm like 12.
We're 5 years old on this podcast.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Florence Butt. And she opened it on the ground floor of their family home in Kerrville, Texas.
House.
Yep.
Butt of the butt.
In 1919, her son took over the store after he had returned from World War I, and he tried to open 4 other locations over the next few years, all of which failed.
No.
Yeah, so wah wah. Eventually,
he wasn't a very good person.
Well, then in 1927, he finally opened a second store that was successful and then purchased 3 other stores and expanded. So maybe he wasn't doing the best location research, right?
I mean, I don't know. Whatever on his team.
Yes.
Do some location analysis.
They have several private brands as well, not as many as Hy-Vee or Meyer, but they do have their Central Market Organics and then just HEB brand Hill Country Fair. I liked that one.
Nice.
Yeah, feels homey. And HEB Creamy Creation. So also ice cream. Again, I don't know. Everybody has their own ice cream brand. And HEB Mootopia Milk.
Mootopia.
Yeah, they have their own like dairy distribution center so they make those things themselves.
I have friends that live in Texas and they are loyal to the HEB.
To HEB.
Big fans.
Like they love it.
They're big fans of the HEB. So I feel like that's where it's at if you're getting groceries in Texas, is the HEB for sure. What's crazy is, so what all this research though of these stores led me to was that these companies are actually considered quite small in the grand scheme of grocery store economics, which this is maybe the researching the obvious part. I don't really think about the size and the scale of some of these stores. You just live in an area and that's the store that's everywhere and that's where you're shopping. And so what I ended up looking up is the grocery market share. Quick economics lesson. Market share is just the percentage of a particular industry that a certain company owns. So let's say that there's 5 grocery stores in the entire United States, then the entire groceries market for the United States would be divided up between those 5 stores and how much percentage of sales those stores are doing on a nationwide scale. Okay, obviously there's a lot more than 5 grocery stores in the US, but that's an easy way to explain what market share is. And so I was looking at market share, and basically none of the ones that we were talking about, except for HEB, even makes the list of top 10 largest grocery store
crazy.
chains in the US. So
That's crazy to me.
HEB is actually number 9, and they only control 2% of the whole US grocery store market at number 9.
Wow. That's tiny.
It's so small. Right. So what's crazy to me is that the largest company for controlling the grocery market is Walmart.
Yeah, I never shop at Walmart.
I mean,
For my groceries.
I just don't think about Walmart as a grocery store, personally.
I don't either.
I know there's groceries there, and I know plenty of people shop at Walmart, but Walmart controls 23.6% of the US grocery market share. So almost a quarter of all groceries in the US are actually being sold at Walmart, which I thought was crazy because I feel like there's so many other grocery stores, and Walmart's just basically getting a quarter of grocery sales in the whole US.
I would assume that has something to do with just their sheer number of locations too.
Yeah, I would assume that it also is because they're basically nationwide. However, some of these other companies that are on this list of top 10, they could almost claim to be nationwide because they own so many different stores. So, for example, around me, the other store that I shop at is Giant. And so I looked at that one, and Giant is a grocery store that started in Washington, D.C., but it is owned by a company called Ahold Delhaize. And Ahold Delhaize is a Dutch/Belgian company. It was originally 2 separate companies, Ahold and Delhaize, and they merged. And they're a Dutch/Belgian company, and they own several grocery chains in the United States, including the Giant that you'll find in DC and Maryland. There's another store also called Giant that is in Pennsylvania, and they own those Giants too. So there's 2 separate Giant grocery stores that are in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and it's very confusing, but they are different stores.
But they're different stores.
They're different stores. And they were bought
called the same thing.
Ahold Delhaize at different times.
Okay.
I will link an entire article that I found discussing the 2 Giants because
and how different they are.
And,
why hasn't one changed their name?
Company. So what is interesting is they basically started before copyrights were a thing, and so neither one of them, and before trademarks, so neither one of them could get the other one to change their name. The Giant stores that exist in Pennsylvania also own a grocery store chain called Martin's. And
oh yes, I know Martin's.
Yes, so they also own Martin's. So the Pennsylvania Giant owns Giant of Pennsylvania and Martin's. And then the Giant of DC just has Giant stores in DC and Maryland. And then when this Dutch company, Ahold Delhaize, they bought the Pennsylvania Giants, and then later they bought the DC and Maryland Giants. And so in order to avoid confusion, since they now owned both Giants, any Giants that were owned by the Pennsylvania Giants that existed in Maryland were changed to Martin's. But there's been 2 Giants. It's very confusing. They're not the same store.
Okay.
Anyway.
Interesting.
That was a side note of Ahold Delhaize, because they also own some other stores that people might be familiar with. They own Food Lion. Some people might have heard of that one. My brother-in-law affectionately calls it the Shitty Kitty. So now you can have
a bar here that we call the Shitty Kitty.
So now you can have that one. So they own Food Lion. They also own Stop and Shop, and they own Hannaford that we were talking about in New England.
Hannaford Bros.
Yes, they own Hannaford. And those are the US stores that they own. They also own a handful of stores in Europe. So they own a bunch of European stores. But in the US market, just those US stores, that company ranks 7th in US market share. 7th in US market share for groceries. So
they're still kind of far down the list.
Yeah, so they're still far down the list. And 7th with only 4.6% of the market share. So not even 5% of the market share. And they own all those grocery stores. So if you go to a Food Lion, or if you go to any of the Giants or If you go to Hannaford, you're probably seeing the same store brands and things like that because they're all actually owned by this Dutch-Belgian company. Moving up the list,
Yeah.
we get to, so the fifth largest in terms of US market share is still small, 4.8%. That's Publix. So Publix is going to be the big one that a lot of people know in the Southeast. They started in Florida. What's interesting about Publix is that they are the largest employee-owned company in the United States.
Nice.
Yeah, they have almost 1,400 stores in the Southeast. Publix was started by George Jenkins, and he worked at Piggly Wiggly grocery stores. And then he left Piggly Wiggly in 1930 to start his own grocery store. And the goal of his grocery store was that he wanted any employee in the store to be able to generate ideas for the store. So any employee, regardless of what position you were in, could come up with an idea for the store and share it. And that's why they have this employee-owned model still today. But they're the fifth largest in the US by market share, but still only at 4.8%.
Yeah, that's still very small.
Yes. So moving up the list, fourth, Albertsons at 6.4%. And then third, Costco at 9.2%. And then second is Kroger at 10.1%.
I did not realize how big Kroger was until we started talking about this topic.
And same with Albertsons. I'm not really going to go into the history of Albertsons, but I'm going to say that Albertsons, if you haven't heard us talking about the store that you shop at, it's probably because it's actually owned by one of these other companies. Because Albertsons owns Acme Markets, which I know I had when I lived in Ohio. They own, obviously, Albertsons in California, Arizona, sort of like that coastal area, Washington, Oregon. They own Jewel Osco in Illinois. That's like the big one in the Chicago area. They own Safeway, which is pretty huge, right? Yeah, Safeway, we have them here. They own Shaw's, which is, again, New England grocery store.
We're familiar with that one. Yep.
They own Tom Thumb, which is another big Texas one around Dallas. They own Vons, which is a big grocery store in like Vegas area and Southern California. And then they own several others, like 10 other ones, but they're much smaller ones that only have maybe 20 or less locations.
Okay.
But Albertsons has grocery stores basically across the country. It's just that they're named all these different things because originally they were their own independent stores that got bought up by Albertsons.
So Albertsons has been doing the acquisition game.
Yes. And the big one that they recently did was when they bought Safeway in 2014. And the important thing there is that when Albertsons bought Safeway in 2014, they actually switched over to using Safeway's signature line, which is the Safeway brand of food. So when they acquired Safeway, all their other stores started phasing in the Safeway generic brand as their generic brand. So that's why you'll see that Safeway brand at Albertsons locations, Vons, Acme, Shaw's. There's the trick of how you know who owns your grocery store, what the label is.
So I had no idea how big Kroger had gotten either, because that's always been a staple in central Indiana. We've always had Kroger, so I kind of assumed it was more regional, and it turns out that it's actually very expansive. So I was kind of interested in like where Kroger started.
Mm-hmm.
And they were founded in 1883. So they have been around for a long time, by Bernard Kroger. And they started out in Cincinnati, which I didn't know. So Bernard Kroger, he opened the first store in 1883. He was only 23 years old and was the son of German immigrants. His father had owned a dry goods store that closed. It was not successful from economic difficulties in 1873. So he took his life savings of $372 and along with his friend who had $350 in savings to open a grocery store in downtown Cincinnati. And they actually started out selling tea. So they were called the Great Western Tea Company. And he just started out like he was going to sell tea. And
I guess in the
didn't
1800s, that was a big business.
And keep in mind, too, something else that I was kind of reading about and that I don't often think about is that really the grocery stores that we shop at today are much different than where they originated. Because it used to be that you would go to a butcher for your meat and you might get milk delivered by the milkman, and you would go to a dry goods store for non-perishables and things like that. True. There were all these different stores that you would go to depending on what you needed. And the idea that all of them would be together in one store was not something that happened right away. So anyway, he started out selling tea, and they actually delivered some of their groceries and items by horse-drawn carriage and Model T in the early days. In 1916...
Pioneering that Instacart grocery delivery.
Yes, right? They were pretty cutting edge in terms of what they offered and some of the things that they tried out over the years. So 1916, they introduced self-service shopping, which I believe Piggly Wiggly is credited with being the first store to offer self-service, but Kroger was not far behind.
Fun fact about Piggly Wiggly is that while they are actually owned by C&S wholesalers, they are all franchised, which I thought was interesting.
That is interesting.
Every Piggly Wiggly
is individually owned.
Actually a franchise.
16 self-service shopping. So again, keep in mind before this, typically all of the goods were kept behind the counter, and you went up to the counter and you asked a clerk to get you the items that you wanted. So self-service shopping with a basket and walking around the store and picking things up was a new concept at that time.
Yeah.
They were also the first grocery store to have an on-site bakery and to sell fresh meat along with their groceries. So again, that combination of, instead of going to separate stores, putting it in one. And actually, this was so controversial at the time that Bernard Kroger received some threatening letters from members of the community who were threatened by the fact that he was selling things that they wanted to sell, like the butchers and the other stores. And the fact that he was offering them all together in his store, they did not like that competition.
Ooh.
So he actually received some death threats over this at the time.
Wow.
I know, right? People were serious about their groceries.
For real.
So they were not happy about that. But he just kept on going. And obviously it worked out for him. So in the 1930s, they were also the first grocery chain in the U.S. to monitor product quality, test foods, and to open a store surrounded by parking lots, which is something else that I had not thought about. So they kind of pioneered this idea that, you know, with the increase in the automotive industry and people being able to own cars, that people would drive to the grocery and want to, instead of it being in a walkable location. And so they actually piloted a store in Indianapolis with 75 parking spots and then studied how that affected their overall sales, and obviously found that it was very effective because they were correct that people were going to be driving to do their grocery shopping and wanting to park. They really started getting into their acquisitions and whatnot in the 1950s. And also in the 1970s, they were the first grocer in the U.S. to test out the electronic scanner. And they also, at that time, with that electronic scanning, formalizing their consumer research. So using that information about what was being purchased in order to better tailor what they offer to people.
Big data research back in the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, with the giant room size computer.
Right. Punch
blinking
card.
lights. Yeah. Not only a very successful grocery store, but really, I think, stayed on top
Yeah.
of where the market was going over time, which allowed them to be very successful. And so just a few of the companies that Kroger has acquired, there's a pretty long list, so I won't read all of them, but some of the big ones. City Market, Dillon's. I know Dillon's is kind of a big one.
That was the big one we had when I lived in Kansas. That's where we went shopping.
Okay.
Was Dillon.
Fred Meyer,
Mm-hmm.
Fry's, JC Food Store, King Supers,
Mm-hmm.
Metro Market, Payless Supermarkets, the Pick and Save, Ralph's, a pretty big one, and then Smith's Food and Drug. And I know Smith's is also a pretty big one as well. So they've acquired all of those, and those are now owned by Kroger.
Oh, and Harris Teeter too, right?
Oh, yes, and Harris Teeter. Yep.
I just know Harris Teeter from DC.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot.
They own a lot of, way more than I realized. And obviously they have some of their own private brands too. Again, not as many as Meijer or Hy-Vee, but you can get Kroger brand items, or Big K is one of their brands. Private Selection is their higher end, whatever, private label brand. And then Simple Truth is their organic.
Yeah, I remember Private Selection. I've definitely purchased Private Selection products like at Dillon's or at Harris Teeter.
Yeah.
And it was my clue. My clue to know that it was actually a Kroger store.
Yeah.
This Private Selection was in the store.
And that one and Simple Truth, if you see those, it's owned by Kroger.
Kroger is big too. I mean, not as big as Walmart, but they do control 10% of the market share. And if you follow grocery news and economics like I do, you'll know that there's like a big controversy going on right now with Kroger and Albertsons, because Kroger announced that they were going to merge with Albertsons. The Albertsons has all those other stores. So we're talking a grocery chain, Kroger, that has 10% of the market, and a grocery chain, Albertsons, that has another a little more than 6% of the market want to merge together, which would create a pretty sizable market share, right? Percent. And so they announced in 2022 that they wanted to merge, but it's been blocked by a series of different lawsuits.
Ooh, Walmart?
No.
Oh,
the FTC is the big one, right? So the FTC, they make sure that we're not going to have large monopolies and that there's going to be fair practices in our capitalist market system that we live in the US. And so basically what the FTC was saying is that if Kroger and Albertsons merged, because of all of the other grocery store brands that those two own, it would create pockets of the United States where the only grocery stores that are available in that area would be owned by Kroger Albertsons merger.
Okay.
And so therefore that would create a monopoly. The other situation is because of monopoly laws and other regulations, you can only own a certain number of stores without it getting into this rule. Essentially, I'm like distilling this down to the basics. So they would have more than a certain threshold if they merged in certain areas. And so some of those stores in those areas would have to be divested and sold off. And so that would also create food deserts in certain areas because the grocery stores would get sold off. Kroger has its own arguments. One being, we're actually not going to be creating a monopoly because the reason we're merging is because we're trying to compete with Walmart.
I was just going to say,
what are they doing about?
Yeah,
exactly. Right. So they're saying, hey, we're actually not trying to compete with, Wegmans. We're not trying to compete with Market Basket. We're actually trying to compete with Walmart. Well, Walmart they can charge such low prices because they're so big, right? Yeah. So like the more you're selling of something, the lower you can make your price. And so Kroger's like, we're trying to compete price-wise with Walmart, and we can't do that unless we become larger in order to meet that demand. So the other argument they have is when they're divesting these stores, they're going to be selling them to other stores. So the grocery stores theoretically will still exist, in those areas. It's just that they'll be owned by something else. So, for example, Piggly Wiggly is set to take over 600 stores if this merger goes through.
Oh, wow.
So 600 of the stores that would have been previously owned by either Kroger or Albertsons would become Piggly Wigglies in this scenario, which means the Harris Teeters in DC might become Piggly Wigglies because they're within these number of stores that they're supposed to divest from if the merger goes through.
Okay. Fascinating.
But so that's like the big situation that's going on right now with these stores, is that they're getting sued. They're also getting sued by 8 different states, and the states themselves are suing again because they're concerned about the divestment of stores and creating pockets of food disparity. That's mostly why these states are suing them. But closing arguments for some of these cases literally just happened on October 24th. So by the time you listen to this episode, there may or may not be a ruling in this whole scenario.
So here's my question. You're telling me that everyone's all upset because Albertsons and Kroger want to get married and they want to be the biggest grocery family in the U.S., but nobody's upset about Walmart owning 23% of them. And you're telling me that there aren't areas of the country where the only place to shop is a Walmart? The rules that they're applying to Albertsons and Kroger seem to not apply to Walmart currently.
To Walmart. I'm not quite
sure. Or
didn't
in the past, maybe. Because, I mean, obviously they're a company that's expanded rapidly and, like, grown hugely, and I don't have a problem with that, but I'm just like, why are you picking on Albertsons and Kroger? If they want to get together and do this thing, like, I don't know. They're not even going to touch Walmart in market share.
Right. And that was the whole big argument, is that, especially the state of Washington in their lawsuit, they're arguing that basically what's happening in the Seattle area is that the Kroger stores are sort of the high end of pricing, and then Walmart has been the low end of pricing. And so the Albertsons owned stores get sort of checked in their prices because they won't exceed the high end pricing of Kroger, and then they won't go below the low end pricing of Walmart. So it helps sort of regulate prices on that level for consumers. And so they're arguing that if Kroger and Albertsons merge, then there won't be a price check on the high end of prices, because then the high end can creep up. So it's about, I guess, the consumer and price checking on that level.
Well, I've got news for them. So, everything is freaking expensive right now. Like, it's $9 for a 12-pack of Coke. I don't know how preventing Albertsons and Kroger from merging is going to fix that. But
yeah. I'm just legitimately curious as to what's going to happen with this, just because it's been such a long process and been in the news since, for the last 2 years, and they still haven't put this merger through.
Interesting.
I'm curious about it, to be honest. And I did not realize that so many grocery stores are actually owned by Kroger, Albertsons, and this Dutch-Belgian company.
Yeah. And then Walmart.
Whole Dilhays.
And then there's Walmart.
Yeah, and none of them are even touching. None of them are even touching Walmart. Because it's basically Walmart has a quarter, and the next 9 in line barely have another quarter.
Yeah.
Combined.
Man.
I know.
Fascinating.
Economics of grocery stores. I don't know if this episode was interesting for people or not, but it definitely sent me down a weird rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you did the economic research, because I got sidetracked by all of the grocery founding history and then also grocery shopping carts. Did you know the grocery cart, which, by the way, is also called a shopping cart, a carriage, a buggy, or if you're across the pond, it might be a trolley.
Yes, there we go. Regional terms for shopping cart.
That's right. I've got a map for you.
Nice.
Was invented in 1934, and The idea was to help shoppers with heavier items, obviously, because the baskets, as they were adding more and more items to these groceries, it was becoming harder to carry all of the items that you might want to pick up in one trip. So this guy, Sylvan Goldman, had this idea based on a folding chair but made it into a shopping cart. So it kind of like expanded into, like, it kind of had the legs of a folding chair, but it had the cart. And he tried to introduce it, but people did not like them. And let me tell you why. Okay. First of all, women felt that it was too close to having to push a baby stroller or a baby buggy, and they did not want to have to push that anymore if they were done with that part of their children's lives. And men found it insulting that it implied they couldn't carry all of their groceries and made them feel like they were weak. And so they were not interested.
I'll be honest, we've all done that trip where you go into a store and you're like, I'm just going to get a couple things. And then all of a sudden you're holding 12 items in your arm.
Yes, and I'm dropping one of them. I'm worried. And then I walk past a shelf and I need one more thing. And I'm like, okay, now I have to walk back to the front to get a cart. But yeah, so shockingly, to me at least, the shopping cart was a hard sell to people. So this guy actually hired actors and actresses to like push the carts around the store and act like they were shopping. He started out hiring like some young, attractive women to like push the cart around. And then he kept on hiring these people. And so that helped to start converting people over, I guess. And eventually
people saw
they did catch
how convenient they were.
Yes,
when they saw the actors acting like they were convenient.
Yes. Who would have thought that like shopping carts would have been a difficult thing to convince people to use?
I love a small cart.
Yes, I do too. I love the small carts as well.
Yes, cart.
That's my choice as well.
The millennial hill I'll die on. Give me one of these carts at every store.
Yes, please.
The double layer cart.
Agreed.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And they do look more like the small carts, which I think all cars should be like. Like those stupid giant carts are so difficult to navigate.
Why did we transition? Like, why did we transition to giant carts?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because people were buying more stuff. You can barely fit them down the aisle sometimes. Like if it's a small store, those giant carts, like you're gonna knock into people. You're gonna knock over stuff on the end caps. Like,
and they're so long.
They're hard to steer. Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. So. Hot take on shopping carts.
Now everyone knows everything about grocery stores, grocery carts, mergers and acquisitions.
Our grocery preferences.
Market share.
The quote-unquote small groceries that are not part of that giant...
The giant conglomerate of
grocery stores. So.
There you have it. Where are you going to go grocery shopping? Let us know.
Yeah. What's your favorite grocery? Do you have a preference in groceries?
That's true. Maybe I'm the weirder. Yeah, maybe I'm the weirder person that actually has a preference. I don't know.
Oh, no, I absolutely have preferences. And if you're curious about the kind of alcohol and spirits you can buy in these groceries, you can listen to episode 2 of our podcast.
Yes, because you can't get any in Maryland.
That's right. And the beer's not cold in Indiana.
Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.